Happy Friday. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Take Two. This is Heidi Hatch with KUTV 2 News. We are almost through the fabulous month of November. We're almost to Thanksgiving. How we got here, I simply don't know. The year is flying by.
It's crazy.
Maura Carabello is here in studio with us. And joining us over the phone today is former State Senator Curt Bramble. Thank you, both of you, for being here. Maura, I want to start with you. You've been in and out the last couple of weeks. How's life?
Life is good. This has been, I'm sure it is for many people, it's been like a 10-day week. You know how some weeks you get more time in the days?
Yes.
That's not a compliment to this week.
It's not.
Just to be clear. It seems like it's been a really long week. Maybe it's all of us cramming in things before the holiday.
I know. And Curt, you are on your first full year of being retired from the legislature. You've been adventuring. Tell us what you're up to for people who haven't seen you around the Hill for a few months.
Oh, not doing too much. Doing a little consulting. Just got back from Dumaguete, Philippines, where my wife and I were scuba diving. We got back about 12 hours ago.
Oh, wow. So your brain feels like it's been kicked against the wall.
Well, no, my week's been one day today.
Just one day. So far, so good. What's the coolest thing you saw while you were diving?
I think a frogfish. They're probably one of the most unique creatures in the sea.
I'm Googling frogfish
I am too.
now because I want to know what it looks like. And my daughter's a marine biologist, so I feel like I see all the weird things. But now I'm like, do I know what a frogfish is?
I could talk about the nudibranchs that are little
they're
soft-bodied beasts. And what, the frogfish?
They're like so ugly, they're cute.
And they're carnivorous.
Yeah. Awesome. That is so cool. So now we've got another thing to add to our bucket list of things that we need to see.
It's either the frogfish or we were diving with tiger sharks and with bull sharks and manta rays and eagle rays. It was a pretty neat trip.
And you returned alive. So, all right. Well, retirement sounds super great. I think we all are hoping to work towards that someday. Unfortunately, we've got a lot to talk about, even as we're headed up to the holidays. I think the government shutdown kind of delayed a lot of things, and now there's a lot happening. Here in Utah, we talked a little bit last week about the redistricting maps, the judge making a ruling really in the 11th hour at 11:45 p.m. before the deadline, and we're starting to see the fallout this week. I spoke to the Hinckley Report and Jason Perry right after this happened, and his expectation was this would be a race to the courts, turbocharged, I think he said. But what we're hearing now is that there is not going to be a race to the courts. I spoke to Speaker Mike Schultz on Monday this week, and he said essentially that Judge Diana Gibson's 11th hour redistricting ruling kind of tied their hands where they don't have the ability, where they're pushed up against the deadline that the lieutenant governor gave, that there's nothing they can do. Are you surprised by this, Curt?
Not at all. I think Speaker Schultz was being a statesman on it. I have serious reservations and concerns about the process that was used by the judge, but I do agree with Speaker Schultz that there's a real challenge just based on tyranny of the clock.
So you don't think that there's a way around this that he hasn't thought of, that they could still file an appeal at this point, or they're just hands tied?
That's going to be up to the speaker, the president, the governor. I think it's unfortunate the way it came down.
So, Maura, you weren't here with us last week, so a lot has happened. Do you think that there was any politics involved in this last-minute filing that came from the judge, or do you think this was just how it is? Speaker Schultz, I know, is frustrated. The legislature's frustrated. They can't appeal. Is it just how this played out, or was there politics involved?
Well, I mean, the subject's political, right?
Yeah.
So, and the timeline is political. So those are the politics I see involved. I'm not one for the conspiracies around the judiciary, but I absolutely understand where Republican leadership, particularly in the House, is really frustrated that they don't have the options that they want because of the timeline. And this is the challenge with this, I think, for all of us is that it's over and not over, right? So this section, I think, as the speaker said yesterday, he's indicating that he doesn't feel like there's many play right now. We still have a ballot measure that is on this subject. There are members of the body that are talking about impeachment. I don't know that that's a coalesced point of view for all the Republicans, but there are people talking about impeachment of this judge. And also, it may settle what we're voting on in 26. It may not settle what we're voting on in 28. And what you see is the frustration of the process. From my point of view, while I acknowledge the frustration, I think the process was followed. And I think in my experience, I've worked with the legislature for about 30 years. And this, I'm going to use generalities.
This is a long relationship you've had.
And this is not true of I don't mean to indict them as a holistic body. There's a lot of different opinions among the 104. But one of the things that I have found to be true and unique of the legislature is that they tend to think the political universe swirls around them, and it's generally true. They are the primary body that makes law, and and they're elected, and it's important. But I have found that when I work with mayors, or when I work with quasi-governmental entities, or when I work with other entities, they're a more layered group in terms of what their role is. I think that it's challenging when you're coming from the position in which it's a little more top down, that they're who emanate the law. That's not my point of view. I think they play a major role, but I think there are other bodies and parts that balance out the law. And since the assertion of this movement of Prop 4 is a shared responsibility when it comes to reforming your form of government, I think that the Supreme Court in Utah narrowly defined how the relationship between certain ballot measures, not all ballot measures, but certain ballot measures, has to play with the legislature. For me, that is my understanding of the law. It's been my understanding of the law since I first did a ballot measure in about 25 years ago. It's fair that that's not the point of view that a legislator has, where a legislator feels like they're the dominant position. I bring it akin to, when a member of law enforcement, when there's a detective and he's put together this case and he has spent years making a case, and he goes and the judge or the prosecutor refuses to prosecute, and he's frustrated because his role in lawmaking is implementation, and he feels like the judiciary didn't support it. Well, I don't look at that and think, oh, that's a corrupt judge. I look at that and say the judiciary has a role, those making laws, in this case the legislature has a role, and as do those enacting law. So for me, this fits my view of the roles of the citizens, my view of the roles of the legislature, my view of the role of the judiciary. Again, totally fair that is not a legislative point of view. And my experience is that the legislature really sees themselves as the center of the political universe. And this certainly goes against that notion, but it's not a point of view that I have had.
Curt, is that true? Are you the center of the universe when you're in the legislature?
I chuckle at Maura's rather interesting interpretation. It's not that the legislature is the center of the universe, but the Constitution certainly is the basis for our system of government. And the Constitution does not give the authority to a judge to set an apportionment, a redistricting map, based on the plaintiff's partisan map. And, we talked before bringing this live, the myth that you have an independent, unbiased, nonpartisan group setting lines. Anyone that breathes in Utah has a pretty good idea where Republicans and Democrats live. The myth that this map that was put forward by the plaintiffs and then was selected by the judge, that somehow was done in a completely unbiased and independent fashion, really is a myth that needs to be explored further. I reject the notion that the legislature is the center of the universe. The legislature has a certain role, as does the judiciary and the executive branch under our system, but there is no accountability for this judge like there is the legislature when a decision is made. And redistricting inherently, from the founding of this nation, the founding fathers, when they talked about this, recognized that it was a political process, not a judicial process. And I think there's serious angst among those that disagree with this judge on several fronts. The judge, I don't believe, has the authority to choose the map submitted by the plaintiffs and say, well, that's that's where the state's going to be. So there will be future action on this.
That's been my number one response, Maura. So Doug Owens was here filling your seat last week, and he said that the decision was made by the League of Women Voters to make this map, and it was done without partisan information. And the number one text I've gotten from people always text me while they're running their errands or listening to the podcast and give their refutes to arguments. That's like the number one thing people were texting me about last week. They're like, it's partisan whether you want to admit it or not, because unless you're blindfolded and someone spins the map around upside down,
that's not the issue.
You know where
that's not the issue.
is.
So yes, any map chosen has a point of view, and it will have a point of view as to how to do it, whether it's a donut hole or a pizza slice. So gerrymandering, drawing boundaries, is a political exercise, but that's not what the judge ruled on. I think that's the hubris. I do find hubris in a legislature who says that the role of the judiciary is not to fully understand the Constitution and the law. In fact, that is their role. It's in fact not the role sometimes. You have a legislative body that in fact took out constitutional notes. They said they don't even need an attorney to define their legislation. They don't need a constitutional note. It is the role of the judiciary to protect and define and to interpret the law. That is in fact their law. She didn't choose a map. She ruled for the plaintiff. And I know many listening will say that's a distinction without a difference, but for me it is not. She did not draw her own map. She was given a judicial framework in which there are two parties, and she is choosing who and which party follows the law the most. And the law in this definition is Proposition 4, and the categories enumerated by a piece of legislation that was passed by the people. So when we start to redefine, I believe that she did not approach her job saying, I'm going to pick a district. I think she has before her legal foundation, legal precedents, and a legal framework, and she chose the plaintiffs in this instance, and she chose the map that they chose because they were representing Proposition 4 in that instance. That was the legal argument in front of her. So now you have a lot of us as political pundits who are laying over what we think is the outcome of that politically. Absolutely, there is a political outcome of her decision. But I do not think that was the basis of her decision. I think she was there to interpret the law, and the law she was looking at was the law that was passed by the people in Proposition 4.
I want to get in just a minute to what the fallout is and what the political end to this is in just a minute with who will be running and who won't be. But I want to mention, while we have former State Senator Curt Bramble here, you worked on redistricting maps back after the 2001 census, and I think eventually had the 4th district, was it added in 2006? So you were working on this when definitely a political and partisan matter at the time too. Utah was hoping and knowing that they would get the next 4th district, but I think we missed it by a margin of 856 people in 2001 with the census. So you took part in this. Do you feel like there was a lot of political bickering back then and trying to figure it out? It's always going to be the same, or were you guys a nice peaceful bunch and drew it up and everyone agreed?
No, there was absolute political debate and hard-fought political debate, as there should be. The difference is, in this particular case, I had the privilege of chairing the redistricting committee. It was for the 5th, I believe it was the 5th special session in 2006.
That's
Senate
a lot of
Bill
special
500
sessions.
That was Senate Bill 5001. And if you look at the record, the voting record on that bill, you'll find it had strong bipartisan support. But the way we came up with that bill, Senator Ed Main and I sat at his kitchen table for 3 days, having a robust and intense and aggressive, a sporty debate about what these maps should look like. And we battled to something that neither of us said was ideal for our team, but that was best for the state.
I'm imagining chocolate chip cookies getting served at some point during the battle. Were there treats involved or no?
Oh, I think there might have been popcorn and Diet Coke for the spectators. But the point is, we went through the process. We didn't look at partisan voting records. We didn't need to. No one can tell me that Rose Park or the Marmalade District or Sugar House or Park City can be Republican dominated. And for now,
We are speaking to the senator
this is
as
only
he's
a
driving there.
second.
We lost you for just a second.
Yeah,
So
you're back.
the last thing we heard from you is that you said that you didn't think that when you were looking at Sugar House or Marmalade or Park City that they would be Republican areas.
Well, the idea that somehow we don't know where Democrats live or Republicans live or how they vote really is a myth. The question is, how do you come up with something that you can live with? When we see now op-eds that say, well, a 17-point Democrat district, well, that's competitive, and yet the maps put forward previously had a 8 or 10% Republican. Well, that's partisan, and those are Republican dominant. The sophistry, the duplicity, the double standards, even as we talk here, when I listen to Maura's,
You're not invited to his
rationale.
kitchen table, it sounds like.
Yeah, it doesn't sound
No,
like
I would love to have her at my kitchen table and to explore this further. Having a civil discussion and a civil debate, even though you have disagreements, that is the foundation of the American system of governance. There's nothing wrong with having a robust debate. It's how you finally find a conclusion of that debate and how you find a way forward that makes our system work. And I don't see that happened in large measure over the last several really tough issues here in the state.
I do think what we probably both agree on is that somewhere the system fails us when it's being resolved in litigation, right? I mean, that's not a finger pointing statement. I do think that the outcome for everybody is unsatisfactory now. I mean, this process, I think there were some good parts, there are some challenges. The one thing that's nice about redistricting is there's a reason it happens every 10 years. We change our approach. I remember I ran a congressional campaign in Utah in 2000, and it was Chris Cannon's seat for those of you who are of that age. And if I remember right, Curt might remember better, I want to say there were 18 counties in that district at the time. I have no doubt that whoever drew that map at that moment in time, so this would have been a 1990 census or like a 2000 census, I'm sure that fit the thinking.
Gas was cheaper to drive to all your counties.
I mean, I like that these moments evolve in terms of who is representational. The last little bit, the leadership of the legislature has been really into the notion that you have rural and urban. That's a legit assertion. It's also legit to say, no, you have consolidated bodies. Both of those are fair notions. It's just how, as Curt said, how do you negotiate that so that everybody is feeling like their version of the world works for them?
Maura, listen to the rhetoric and look online, social media, whatever today. The idea that somehow it is fair that Salt Lake is made whole, that it's unfair if Salt Lake had to be split. It's unfair if you're living, that your neighbor across the street's in a different district. It's okay if that happens somewhere else in the state, but it's not okay if it happens in Salt Lake. Those are the kinds of double standards when you have equal population. And the challenge of redistricting, it's a challenge no matter how you cut it, because there will always be winners and losers.
I think I might get cut off from my neighbors in South Jordan with the new map. I have to see the exact boundaries, but I think I might be in the first district, and then people across the street from me in.
Yeah, I need to look. I think I might be in the new district.
My point is that the folks that argued against the Republican maps, one of their arguments in chief was we were split up and we should be kept whole. Well, the fact is, when you have boundaries and you have districts that have to have equal population, there are going to be splits, and there's going to be splits in neighborhoods, there's going to be splits in cities, there's going to be splits in counties. You can't have equal population without having splits. And it's sort of like taxes. The only fair tax is one that you pay that I don't have to pay. That kind of philosophy doesn't work when you're trying to find common ground.
Yeah, I mean, I will come back to your original question. From my point of view, this is a juror or a judge who was following the defined law. And it did not sync up with the path that particularly the House of Representatives wanted it to take. But that inherent difference in how we're interpreting law does not make a body corrupt. It makes them disagree.
with due respect, I don't believe the judge followed the standards of Prop 4.
I know, and you would be in a line with the legislature who doesn't believe that anyone.
She gives lip service and rhetoric. I read her opinion. I read the Supreme Court opinion on Article 1, Section 3, that power to reform government rests with the people. What the Supreme Court ignored was the idea that the rest of the Constitution puts guardrails and defines what that voice of the people means and how the Constitution is amended. And starting with a Supreme Court decision on Prop 4 to begin with.
Yeah, and I mean, I read the same thing. This is where two fair people can disagree, because I read that as well. I have done more ballot measures than anyone in the state of Utah. I feel like it's an area of expertise, although I am not a Supreme Court justice. So I will defer to their expertise, particularly collectively. And it was one of the most thoughtful, long, readable decisions I have read in a long time. And she is very much in keeping with how it was articulated by the Supreme Court and the laws between ballot measures. It was actually in keeping with my 20 years of practice in this area. So not only philosophically, this is not a philosophical point for me. This is a practice point in an area that I have some expertise. And again, I have found that usually for the legislators that I'm talking to right now, it's more of a point of view about what they think their role is versus what they think the people's role is.
You cannot conflate plaintiffs putting forward a partisan map and arguing that map is a representation of the voice of the people. It's a representation of really Democrat operatives.
I mean, I will reject the notion. The speaker and I have gone the rounds on this too. I'm going to reject the notion in a state that has a supermajority of Republicans that the Republican Party and the Republican supermajority was just somehow outflanked by Democratic operatives. They don't have the votes to do that, and that they've somehow co-opted. I do think this is the will of the people. I do think she was interpreting to Prop 4. And I do know the majority of Utahns voted for Prop 4.
Well, I definitely think the speaker, while he can't right now, will eventually with the legislature appeal this decision. It just won't be for this next one. So I want to talk about the political or partisan fallout that comes from this decision, where whether you like it or not, this seems to be that this is going to be the map, unless there's some weird Christmas miracle that Republicans aren't expecting, that this is the district we're going to have where it's plus 14 to 24, depending how you're looking at it for Democrats. That means Republicans are kind of scrambling behind the scenes. We have 4 Republican congressional members right now. One of them is going to have to either step down and not run and let someone else, or run and take it like a man or a woman and lose their seat. Representative Burgess Owens published a letter just yesterday, and I'm going to read the first paragraph real quick. He says, "I write this letter with deep sorrow and unmistakable resolve. Sorrow because it is painful to watch a Utah judge abandon the restraint, balance, and humility that our system depends upon. Resolve because the people of Utah deserve someone willing to speak plainly about what your actions have done to our representative government. You have acted as the architect of Utah's congressional map, using timing and authority to impose an outcome that was never chosen by the people." I'll post the full letter online. This comes a day after Politico put out a report saying that there was this struggle going on inside of the Republican delegation trying to figure out what happens. They surmise that Owens might be the first to say, okay, I'm not going to run, because he is, I think, 74 years old now. Maybe he'll retire early. Curt, do you see him as being the one who loses out on a seat, or is there going to be some kitchen table talks between the 4 of them where they're arm wrestling who gets what district?
Boy, I think you are scratching the surface of something that can be very, very difficult. I understand someone was just convicted of electioneering by having discussions about getting into or out of a race. I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic on how those discussions, if they occur, how they occur.
I hadn't really thought about that. So that's not legal to go talk with your friends about who's getting which district and who's running for what?
Oh, I think you can have those discussions. It depends on the context and how those discussions unfold.
Yeah, so there's some interesting things. Are you hearing anything from your friends in the political world about how this is going to shake out as people pick their districts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is tough, and I think it's a tough conversation. for the representatives who are well, and it appears as though that's Celeste Malloy most likely and Burgess Owens who have to have that conversation. And as Curt said, it's appropriate to have that conversation. It's not appropriate to try and give any incentive to the outcome as well. I do think elections are the will of the people, and while I think that the Democrats seem to be celebrating in it seems to be, if this stays, that it's favored by the Democrats. I don't know that I would get too cocky if I were the Democrats. I think they've got to make a case, and I think an incumbent Republican can make a case depending on what their pitch is. So while it's certainly this, if we're going off of the map we're talking about, it's leaning Democratic for sure. I don't think I would take it as a foregone conclusion that an incumbent Republican couldn't make a case.
Maura, I'll counter that just a little bit. Karen Shepard, Jim Matheson, go down the list of Ben McAdams, Bill Orton. We've had competitive districts that Democrats have won. Hasn't been a slam dunk. When Bill Orton won the race against Carl Snow, Carl had some very serious unforced errors in his campaign, and it gave a Democrat an in.
Yeah, he lost in a primary, but And
the challenge that I have with the decision that the judge made, there were maps that were presented that were put before her that would have been competitive, that would have met the standard of competitive under the Prop 4 regimen. She chose to reject those in favor of the plaintiff's most partisan map. And I think Burgess makes that case in his letter. I think that others have made that case, looking at what the practical application of the decision is. I think that's where it's really unfortunate. Just as Eddie Main and Senator Main and I hammered out something that worked years ago, it seems that what this judge has done inherently has poured gasoline on the partisan divide in the state. You have a district in Salt Lake right now that when State Senator Blouin says, well, he'll only run if it's a deep, deep blue district, and now he's considering running, and we hear that Ben McAdams is too moderate for the district. I'm not sure that goes to the notion that we should come together as Americans in a representative form of government, so much as it does the opposite and pushes more tribalism on the state.
Yeah, that would be a new point of view for the Republican Party, that they didn't want safe Republican seats. And it would be a new point of view for the Democratic Party that they didn't want safe. And it would be a new point of view for voters that they didn't have the chance to vote for someone that best represents them. So to insert that a Democratic district is somehow vitriolic and not balanced in a Republican district is because when we look at the rest of the state, three of the four districts are equally partisan to Republicans. So I am not going to tell you that Celeste Malloy does not represent her district, even though it is predominantly performing Republican. I'm not going to suggest that she's not a good representative because I looked at the math around her district and it's Republican math.
Look, I thought those Democrats that I named had a great deal of respect for them, worked with them. I thought they did a good job. The point I was trying to make was based on the judge's decision. If Prop 4 was this nirvana that will give us these competitive nonpartisan districts that will give opportunity to candidates, it failed miserably.
But I am asserting that what we were talking about is the quality of the person elected. And I do not think a Democratic district is going to create an experience in which you will have a vitriolic, unproductive Democrat. Just like I think that a Republican-dominated state does not necessarily mean that I'm going to get an inferior candidate because of that. So I'm leaving behind the conversation of not liking the maps and dealing with the maps we have. And I think the Democratic district will represent Utah proudly, even when and if they elect a Democrat.
I want to talk about those Democrats in just a second. One thing I do think is interesting is that Better Boundaries goal, definitely, as we've been talking about, hasn't been met, because I think they really were looking for maybe those competitive districts where everyone felt like they were involved and wanted to be talking about it. You might see more Republicans kind of check out in this district because they know it's going to be easily won by Democrats. The way you know that it's definitely a plus 14 to 24 district is by how Ben McAdams and how others are campaigning already. Ben McAdams was really towing a very fine line between being a Republican and a Democrat when he originally ran and won in that congressional seat. It seems like his tweets, when I watch what he's posting, is a race to the left, where he was putting ads about abortion on, about his belief about family, and that he was personally against it, but supported a woman's right to choose. Now he is tweeting full support for codifying abortion into law. He tweeted about Transgender Day, which I think was yesterday. Today he was tweeting his backing of LGBTQ candidates. So anyhow, these are all things which are great and fine, but they're things he probably wouldn't have done when we were looking back to 2019 when he originally won that race. Would you agree that he's definitely changing where he's campaigning and how he's campaigning, Maura?
Yeah, so Ben's in a unique position, because I want to point out that the Republicans have been doing that in their districts forever, and we haven't had a conversation. We haven't had a conversation about their value, their judgment, and how vitriolic they are, even though we've had Republican performing districts. So I just want to point out there's a little bit of difference when we're talking about Democrats. But to Ben's in a unique position because he famously, last go around, at a state Democratic convention, petitioned Democrats to abandon their candidate and go with an independent. And it was a strategy that he and Mayor Jenny Wilson had, and so part of his...
This was Evan McMullen,
part
in case
of
you forgot.
his is reparative therapy. Part of it is he's running in a Democratic district, which, by the way, he ran in when he was a state senator, and he ran in when he was the county mayor as well. So he's run in Democratic defined districts before. But I do think you're right. I'm seeing this much more partisan. I'm seeing when Derek Kitchen announced his, it is like a very partisan to a Democratic point of view. I do think that you're seeing that in a way you don't normally do, and we haven't traditionally had in our elected federal delegates.
Yeah.
We have on local elections for Democrats, but this is a bit new to the federal strategy of getting elected.
Might I respectfully remind both of you that Senate Bill 54, that I was the architect of, gave rise to John Curtis, Spencer Cox, Derek Brown, as opposed to the Phil Lyman or Trent Staggs or Frank Mylar, the hardcore partisan candidates put forward by the Republican Party. As a matter of fact, the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker, president, myself, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, were just served recently with a federal complaint because of Senate Bill 54. And part of that was to open the ballot to make it the people's ballot, not a partisan party ballot only.
Yeah, I personally love options.
Just putting that out there, that in terms of my own personal views, I've differed from the Republican Party on election process, well, probably for the last 50 years.
Yeah, and I think that's a great, that bringing that aspect in, I think, is so critical. As the former senator remembers, I ran Count My Vote. I was the campaign manager for Count My Vote. So we were a part of that whole discussion together. One thing I'll remind the listeners is that the Democratic Party has always had an open ballot system. You don't have to be a registered Democrat to participate. You can be an independent voter. You can be a third-party voter. You could be a Republican. So it's not as much at play when you are looking at electing a Democrat, because the Democratic Party has always had an open ballot system.
Will that possibly change if they keep a district that's their own?
Interesting question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't heard. I just, that is a conversation that I haven't heard. We have Brian King, a very former, just recently retired legislator at the helm of the Democratic Party now. So
and he's been more active for sure as a leader of the Democratic Party. So it's an interesting time for it. I think we're all going to be watching this very closely. I'll be interested as we inch up to the January deadline, how many people jump into this race. We haven't seen Nate Blouin yet. We mentioned Derek Kitchen. I think he got in yesterday or the day before. My week starts to blur at this point. Ben McAdams. And the first to actually get in was Senator Kathleen Riebe. So we're going to be watching this, I'm sure, as more kind of feel it out, talk to their families over the holidays and decide if they're going to jump in. How many will be signature gathering? How many will just go for it at their party convention? All big questions that we're going to be dealing with as we start looking forward to see what happens. A couple others that Politico and others have been reporting might get in. Kael Weston, a former senator, Caroline Gleich, who ran for U.S. Senate last time around, and then again Nate Blouin, who we haven't heard from yet to see if he is going to, although he's been very active on social media, so we'll find out. We have a few other issues to talk about. Former Senator Curt Bramble, again, is joining us on the phone, not in studio with us. Do you have time where you want to stick around, or would you like to call it
sure.
good with the
No,
maps?
no. Whatever works for you guys.
All right. You let us know if you get to a point in traffic where you're like, I'm out, I have to go in the house. My wife's going to be yelling when I'm sitting in the garage. Let us know and we'll cut you free. So moving on to a couple other issues right now. President Trump made a big about face this last week. Back passage and release of the Epstein files. The House passed it with one dissenting vote. The Senate passing it in record time as well. The president signing it. Maura, why do you think the about face, and are we actually going to see what everyone's been waiting for and promised?
Well, I think one of Trump's real powers is sort of reading the tea leaves of what's going on around it, and I think it just became an untenable position for him. But what the more curious thing, and maybe Curt has a better perspective on this, I just found this curious, that unanimously almost the House passes it, and just like amazingly quickly, hours later, the Senate passes it, and the Speaker of the House is totally ticked off. He is like, "What the heck, guys? You were supposed to amend
some amendments,
this.
yeah,
right?" And I thought that was a more telling conversation about what I see as marching orders from the White House. In that the Speaker, it appeared as though, and the Speaker has been, from my seat, very in concert and very in communication and very serving at the will of the president. I am a little critical of him for his lack of independence. And although he's a bright man, and that's part of my criticism, is that I think he has the wherewithal to not be. But that was curious that he was like, wait, that's not how this was supposed to go down. The larger question is, will this continue to dog President Trump? As Congress starts to find a position in which they want to see it, you do see members, really interesting Marjorie Taylor Greene's relationship with
that
Trump right now.
Yeah.
And she's interesting just because of how much she talks. Not sort of,
yeah.
And, and so what will be curious is the inter-party politic with the Republicans right now, and the coalition coming into 2026. So I'm thinking a little longer term, because so far I don't think that Trump has successfully got in front of the Epstein question, where I feel like he has been infamously skilled at getting in front of other potential disastrous scandals.
Yeah, this turned into a hot mess. Curt, he campaigned saying that he wanted these files released, and then he was fighting against it, which made people wonder why he was fighting against it. Has he lost this battle, or can he still win now that he helped push this through?
Interesting question, because now the challenge is going to be what's going to be redacted. You can release a record that has virtually everything redacted, and what's released is meaningless. So it's really going to be telling to see what substance comes out of this. The passing of the issue in the House and the Senate, and the governor or the president signing it. What does that mean in terms of where the rubber meets the road? Will we really have the transparency that, for myself personally, I'd always favor transparency. I couldn't understand why there was a reticence, unless it's to protect the victims or the victims' families, or to harm someone that was not implicated.
Yeah, and there's concern about protecting those who were hearing the cases as well on the grand jury. So
yeah, but that was,
to see.
It was really clear that there is such good precedence with how to redact for a victim's
they can do
point
that.
of view. And I would be interested in Curt's point of view. What's interesting too is then who I see coming into a major player in this fight then is the Attorney General, right? And she's indicated this week a little bit that she is starting to want a position in a way that I would think would be blocking some transparency.
Yes, we'll see what happens. I talk to people too, and I think a lot of people think there's a literal typed up list of just bad people, where like kind of Santa has a list where he checks off the naughty people and they're going to release that. That's just not how it is. There's going to be a lot of documents people have to go through. I don't think Jeffrey Epstein had a diary and he wrote "Dear Diary," and every time he had a new bad friend, he'd write them in a list with nothing else there. So we'll see what happens there. I will be interested to see what comes of that. glad that's one thing that we can stop fighting about online, at least for now, though I guess we'll have to see how transparent things are. I want to bring it back to Utah for a minute. Utah's birth rate, we just got some new numbers coming out from the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. It's not a trend we didn't know was happening, but when you're looking at the hard numbers, you're like, oh, we're not having a lot of babies. So 2.1 is the replacement rate if we want to replace our population. And mostly the state, if you're looking at our average, we're at that. But a lot of our counties, especially along the Wasatch Front, are dropping drastically. Wayne County, I believe, is coming in as the top one. I'm looking at my numbers here. All of a sudden, I need my glasses to see. So we have some of our rural areas where there's families that have 3.1, 2.8, but you look along the Wasatch Front and the numbers are a lot lower. When I post this on social media, Maura, some people are like, good, stop using up all of our stuff, don't have babies. And other people are like, but wait, we need babies. What are we doing wrong? So what do you gather from these numbers as you're looking at the shifts in not only how many children we're having, but having them later in life and other things? How does this play into Utah as a state, and why should we care?
I don't know if concerned is the right word, but I think we should be conscientious of it, because I think a superpower for our economy has been our historically young population.
Yeah.
And I think that has really served us well. I say that from a demographic or an economic perspective. I don't want to socialize that to telling people how they should plan their families, right? That's the dilemma, is that I think you can make and create policy models in which having a youthful population is really advantageous. But how and what the government should do about people's decisions, I think the telling ones are what you said, that we're waiting. 20 to 24 used to be the high population of birth rates. Now it's shifted a little from 25 to 29. That's an interesting statistic. I do think one of the things that you hear policymakers talk about all the time, but I do think it's impacting, is affordability, right? I think a lot of folks who do want kids, and it is their intent to have kids. I think there are more people who are maybe delaying or don't want kids, but for those who want it, I think in a way that we haven't seen for a very long time, affordability is feeling like a barrier to having a larger family.
Yeah. And I don't know that used to be. I feel like there used to be the concept of when you had kids that it was just part of having kids is that there were going to be tough times. There wouldn't be enough money. But I think people are planning more ahead and trying to figure things out. Curt, when you look at these numbers, what are you thinking? I know I, as a mom, have not helped out the state very well. I only had 2 children, so I'm below the 2.1 replacement rate. If my dog counts as 0.1, we're doing okay.
Well, if we take yours and you take mine, we've got 6 kids. We've got 21
we average out. There we go.
we average out. We've done our part. And I came from Chicago, so helped expand the gene pool here in Utah a little bit.
Love it. Some outside blood. Do you see this as an issue going forward, or the people who are saying it's fine, we don't need that many kids, our state will grow just as well? Do you see the way Maura does, that we kind of need it as the engine to keep the economy going?
Look, I think families are the fundamental unit of society, and anything we can do to encourage that. And conflating government's responsibility to provide for a family versus two people deciding to get married, have kids, and find a pathway forward, we seem to be losing that a little bit, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, there's definitely a change in how people look at it. For the record, I did want 4 kids. It just didn't work out for me. Maybe right. God knew. He was like, lady, you can handle 2. That's what you're going to stick with.
2 and a dog.
2 and a dog.
My wife and I stopped at 4, and then number 5 and 6 came along, and we couldn't figure out how.
Fun surprises. So, definitely a change. So we're going to be looking at this. And interestingly enough, when you looked at the Kempsey Gardner policy, when they look at it, they said there's a lot of factors that they look at here in Utah that are different than others. And they look at the LDS Church and when kids are going on missions and their ages they're getting married and how things change. And they said that even like little things that change on when they're going on their missions and coming home change birth rates. Just today, the church lowered the age for their sister missionaries for young women who want to go to 18. Will it change it? I don't know. Will they all go on missions 18 to 20, come back and have families younger? I don't know. So maybe they've got an eye on the ball of how things might change. I want to talk a little bit about legislative interim meetings that have been going on. We're keeping an eye on a lot of things that are going on. One thing we talked about on the 10 o'clock news last night is something that's controversial. It would be a bill that would change how teens who are involved with serious crime, like an aggravated murder, let's say they're 16 or 17 years old, where they get put into the juvenile justice system as opposed to adults. And there's a bill on the table right now, and depending on how you look at it, it could be good or bad, where they would get turned over officially to the state prison instead of juvie, maybe acting as a deterrent possibly. We're seeing a growth, at least it seems like, just as you're looking at some of the stories we've been covering in the last, I'd say 3 months. We've had a lot of teen shootings. It seems like most of them are gang related, not all. And so the question is, would a tougher criminal justice system where you're taking them out of juvie, sending them into the state prison system, Maura, do you think this would be a deterrent and help legally solve some of these problems, or does it change nothing and then you're putting kids into a tougher system?
Yeah, I feel like this is doubling down behind strategies that have failed over and over again. And so I think we're all concerned about, we've talked about a couple of times, the concern about the increase, particularly violent criminal behavior of youth, kids that are surprisingly young, and what's happening to our youth and how are they turning to violence. And we need to continue to have that conversation. So the goal of dealing and interfacing with youth violence, absolutely, we should all be focused on. I think this doubles down behind just proven poor strategy time and time again. We know that our judicial system, which has process, which is so fundamental to America, but what we do know about that is that high consequences do not mean lower crime. That has not been proven. It's not a deterrent. It's certainly not a deterrent for a developing mind. They are not, by definition, thinking consequently when they do this. So do I think it'll bring down crime? Absolutely not. Does it introduce somebody into non-rehabilitation and negative environments that make it more likely for them to be active criminals in the future and recidivism going up? Absolutely yes. So we have a lot of techniques that do intervene. Do you want a different set of circumstances for intervention and reparations to be for a violent crime? Maybe, but incarceration is not helping our communities. It's not deterring crime. And while these kids should have consequences, they should be locked up. I'm not saying that there aren't consequences. I am frustrated when what I see is just sort of virtue tilting and not actually looking at programs and philosophies that reduce crime and reduce the propensity and get at the key issue. So I just don't think it would be effective. And with that, it makes me frustrated because I do think it's a legit problem, but I don't think that this is based on data that shows it will be effective or impactful at all to either the victims' families and our communities, which we should care deeply about, and frankly, those who are committing the crime.
Curt, do you see it differently, or do you see the same, that there could be some issues?
Surprisingly, Maura and I don't disagree on that. I find it interesting. There was a bill in the last year that dealt with youth indiscretion. If you turn 18, but you're still in high school, you could be subject to youth sanctions rather than adult sanctions for inappropriate conduct with a minor. That goes just the opposite of what this bill does. In other words, if you're 18 but you're still in high school, you could fit under the juvenile sexual misconduct standards as opposed to an adult. Where up until this law, 18 was a cliff. Once you hit 18, if you were involved with a minor, it was a felony. And so I see on one hand we're moving in a direction that would kind of agree with Maura's statements, and this issue at hand now tends to go the opposite way. So criminal justice has never been one of my strong suits, but I'm not sure that a 16-year-old, or in this case, I believe it's 17, you're right, their decision-making and such has not matured.
All right, we'll be keeping a close eye on that and so many other things going in the legislature. Before I let both of you go, one last issue real quick. Depending on who you're talking to, this gets rave reviews or people are against it because there's a lot of fear involved with it. But a new energy project is going to be established in Brigham City as Utah's first full-scale nuclear ecosystem. We're hearing a lot that's coming at us fast in the last year about Utah wanting to be an energy leader and bringing in nuclear. There's been talks about bringing in maybe a practice model of it that wasn't actually making energy. This one is going to be funded $750 million from private investment. A lot of people are excited about this Operation Gigawatt. Curt, they're saying, okay, we need energy. We're looking at AI. We're looking at the growth of another 2 million people over the decades here in Utah. We've got to figure out how to be leaders. So the question is this a great idea? Or families who are living there, they're like, we don't want to be the experiments. Nuclear can be scary for us. Where are you at on the issue?
I'm very much pro all of the above, including nuclear. I've had occasion during my 24 years to be the sponsor of much of our current regulatory and tax structure for low-level radioactive waste, and have toured the reprocessing plants in France. I stood inside the reaction chamber in Abu Dhabi 10 days before they inserted the fuel rods. Nuclear can be safe. Certainly, it can be a renewable energy source that does not pollute our air, pollute our water, etc. So I think it can be done responsibly. I fully support it.
And Maura, we're going mini, so we're not talking about massive
small
nuclear
modular
reactors.
Yeah, so I think we need to, just sort of where Curt was going, we need to advance our conversation to have it not be, are you for or against nuclear? But rather, what kind of nuclear are you talking about? Because we know we need a durable, environmentally friendly solution to energy. Durable matters. It's got to operate 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And nuclear is a very elegant solution, whether you, no matter what seat at the table, it sort of checks all the boxes. So I hope as citizens we're getting used to getting beyond the are you pro-nuclear or against nuclear, and instead it's what kind of. And the model that Utah is gravitating towards. Now what we have to watch is good news, bad news. It's privately driven, and there's a lot of different kind of companies. So we do want to make sure that that those in charge of regulatory environments are watching out for us in terms of, for me, two big things. One is, depending on the technology, it could use a little or a lot of water. And I think we have to look at technology in Utah that uses a little bit of water.
Yeah.
And then two, there's a series, even with small modular reactors, there's a series of different kinds of waste that it produces. It's all sort of in a quantity that is manageable, but there are different levels of it. And we should decide and do our own research about what level and kind of nuclear waste. But over and over, they've proven that small modular reactors can have more benefits than they can in waste. We're looking at the same scenario with batteries. Batteries save a ton of problems, but they also create a ton of problems. So there's always going to be a trade-off with the energy. The other third thing I want our local electeds to start talking about more and more is that, I'm going to use Millard County because they're going through this. If we're building all this energy capacity to bring in a big out-of-state data center first,
no. Thanks.
No, thanks. I'm good. So I want to make sure that we've checked all the local box needs, that we're building our hospital infrastructure, we're building our schools, whatever our infrastructure needs are, that we're shoring up prices for residents and keeping them as low as we historically have. All of that has to be first, and then we build and plan for data centers. I know we all use data. I get the part where it is personal, but I don't think it is a highest and best use policy. I think our local needs are the highest and best policy boxes first. But I do love the elegance of nuclear being both environmentally clean and durable. And yeah, there's trade-offs for all energy sources. So I think we should stop asking whether we like or dislike nuclear, but instead asking reporters and Operation Gigawatt to start educating us about what kind it is. And for me, I'm looking at particularly water and waste.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of education I think we all need on this topic. So we'll be talking about this, I'm sure, in the months and weeks, years to come. Thank you, both of you, for joining us. Before I let you go, anything you want us to know? We're heading into Thanksgiving, so we're taking a break next week. Are you up to anything exciting that we should know about or keep tabs on? Maura?
Oh, me.
I'll let you go first.
Okay.
Yeah, I know we're not all in the same
That's
room.
a lot of
so
pressure
sorry,
for me to be.
Curt, I heard you going. Do
interesting.
you have anything that's interesting we should know about before we let you go?
We have a tradition on Thanksgiving, weather permitting.
Ooh.
We fly hot air balloons.
Oh.
And this time of year, balloons are traditionally early morning. With the sun so low on the horizon, even at high noon in November, you don't get the the afternoon winds. And so we have a tradition in our family that, weather permitting, all those kids and grandkids and neighbors, whatever, we take 3 or 4 of our balloons out and we go for balloon flights.
How cool are you? So are you an actual hot air balloon pilot?
I am a commercial hot air balloon pilot, flight instructor. I've been the FAA safety officer for America's Freedom Balloon Fest here in Provo for the last 40 years.
All right. So kids, if you're listening in and this is a family tradition you'd like, to meet Curt Bramble's grandkids, marry into that family if you'd like to do the hot air balloon instead of play football early in the cold morning.
Yeah, that's impressive.
That is fun. I know. Yeah. I don't have anything nearly that cool for Thanksgiving.
No, we're getting our turkey from Texas, which has been going on for generations, but that doesn't really compare to a hot air balloon.
And they drop it off on your porch. Is there something special? You've told us before. What's special about a Texas turkey? Are they bigger and better?
Let's plug them. I don't know them. Okay. Greenberg turkeys. Since the 30s, they smoke their turkey. It's delightful. It's delicious. It's delivered to your door in a lovely packaging. It's so smoked and so delicious, and it's a good turkey.
Heidi, you missed my one-liner here.
Oh wait,
look, I'm the only elected official in Utah that was qualified to deal with hot air. Okay,
that's good.
That's a good one. And now you're out of it, so you'll have to put up with the hot air from the sideline. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm headed to California. My daughter, who just got married this summer's there, so we're heading out to her. Now I'm wishing I would have ordered a turkey that was pre-done to her house because
it's not too late.
Okay, you can still do it now?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to have to get the information because I'm a bit of vegetarian my whole life, and I'm trying to be a grown-up and eat little pieces of meat, but I'm not one who should be trusted with the Thanksgiving turkey. So thank you so much for being here. Find ways to be thankful for your friends and neighbors, whether they vote red, blue, or anywhere in between. Curt, thanks so much for joining us today. Sorry we had a little bit of a mix-up and had you over the phone, but great to have another voice with us today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.